When you think of all the crazy shit that's happened on the World Wide Web, most of the time a perpetrator can be linked back to a fandom. Now, fandoms are nothing new, and conceptually they aren't harmful either. Or are they? I may not be a psychologist, but I do have a bit of a theory for why fandoms could actually be inherently dangerous. You see, fandoms are just a microcosm of people's tribalistic tendencies. The reason why so many wars have been fought over nationalism and religion is the same reason why Steven Universe fans would bully a girl into nearly low-tier godding herself. The only difference between literal Nazis and Steven Universe fans is scale. A majority of fandoms are too small to actually cause any harm, so most of the time their malicious intentions are just ineffective enough to be mocked instead of mourned. That brings us to the real topic of today's video. Instead of giving you a more fleshed out and thought-provoking reasoning behind my thesis, we're just going to go over some of my favorite examples of times in which fandoms were comedically vile. I'm going to ease you all in by talking about some more lighthearted cases before slowly working our way to the most admonishable things a fandom has done. Now, full disclaimer, this video is for entertainment purposes. This is not an expose or indictment on any parties involved. It's mostly just for good fun, and you'll see that with the things I'm including. With that out of the way, let's start off with the Homestuck Spit Bucket video.
Yo, this is the making of Nick Cage. Is it recording now? Yes. No, I mean, it's recording
Now that I've filtered out the part of my audience with a gag reflex, the rest of you may be left with some questions. Most important of which is, why? To be truthful, I'm just as clueless as the rest of you, but luckily we have the power of Reddit on our side to help explain. According to this thread, buckets are basically equivalent to condoms for the trolls of the Homestuck universe. So when you put everyone's bodily fluids into a bucket, you get some sort of gross sex joke. Okay, I'm still more than a little bit confused, but I refuse to dig deeper into Homestuck lore just to understand this softcore smut any better. With that out of the way, your next burning question is probably how this is the least offensive thing on our list. My reasoning for that is because it's a relatively localized incident. The only people harmed by this act were the poor bystanders who made the unfortunate decision to eat at Ruby Tuesdays that night. That being said, we're going to move on to something a lot less gross, but just as stupid. Fun fact that you certainly heard more than 100 times already, Pokemon is the highest grossing media franchise on Earth. By a long shot. It makes sense. I mean, just look at these things. They called this one a skitty. Brilliant. $88 billion well-deserved. Anyway, my point here is that when you have such a ubiquitous brand, there is a large sample size of complete morons within the people who consume its products. My favorite example of just how mindless these drones can be happened in late 2019. You see, at the time, Pokemon's next game releases, Sword and Shield, were in a bit of a controversy. Some fans weren't exactly happy with the quality of these $60 games, and it's a whole complicated thing that I go into more detail on here. All you need to know is that fans were, justifiably, boycotting. However, not every fan cared about if the Pokemon company was fucking them, and they just wanted to get rid of $60 and catch their wholesome wooloo. These people started their own movement, #ThankYouGameFreak, where they countered the scathing criticism by posting praise for the developer and all they've given us. You can probably tell my stance on this whole thing by the way I've been speaking about it, but to play devil's advocate for a moment, I can sort of understand where they were coming from. No, it isn't the developer's fault that the games are rushed, but at the same time, any reasonable criticism wasn't aimed at the developers. Everyone with a brain understood that it was Pokemon Company's fault. And because of these fans who were feeling sorry for the devs, the Pokemon Company never saw any financial recourse for cutting corners. This is a great example of how a fandom can completely fuck itself over. And as one of the fans who was boycotting Sword and Shield, this situation particularly infuriates me. I'll juxtapose that with this next case. Here, a fandom's large outcry on social media got exactly what it wanted, but not what it deserved. Zack Snyder is the movie director behind Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, but he's most well known for his 3 films in the DC Extended Universe. These movies are all cape shit pretending to be highbrow masterpieces, but for some reason people really like the 2 he made. I say 2 because the third, Justice League, basically wasn't made by him due to studio interference. Usually I'd be on the director's side in a situation like this, But Zack Snyder was so pretentious while at the same time making such schlock that I was honestly glad he wouldn't be a part of anything else for the DCEU. His rabid fanbase, however, didn't see it the same way. The Snyder dickriders were so in love with his vision of the DCEU that they started a hashtag to come to his aid. The tag, released the Snyder Cut, didn't take off at first, but the Snyder fanboys were persistent. Over the course of a few years, Warner Bros. Was eventually weathered down by their constant pestering, and the Snyder Cut of Justice League was released to much fanfare. However, even though the fans had gotten exactly what they wanted, they weren't satisfied. Warner Bros. Gave them an inch, and they tried to take a mile by starting another hashtag, Restore the Snyderverse. This movement wasn't to give Snyder just one movie, but for him to take the reins of a whole cinematic universe. So far, the tag hasn't affected Warner Bros. Decisions, but who knows, give it another year or two and maybe Snyder's pests will have made some headway. God knows they'll try. A common theme you may be noticing with these stories is that of mass hysteria. Alone, one person's crazy idea or action will be just that, but as soon as you get a few other people affirming it, it won't be questioned as much. One of the funniest cases of this happening came from the Undertale fandom. Back in 2015, at the peak of Undertale's popularity, an episode of Steven Universe came out which featured a song titled Stronger Than You. Not too much later, a parody of this song, featuring Sans and Frisk from Undertale, was created, and it quickly became more popular than the original. Eventually, parodies were made of the Undertale song without any knowledge that it was a parody itself, despite the fact that the video said it was in the title. That's not even the craziest part of this whole story. This whole misunderstanding actually led to Undertale fans finding the original song and claiming that Steven Universe ripped off the Undertale animation. If YouTube Kids didn't automatically disable comments, I'd go back to that Steven Universe music video and find some comments proving that this actually happened. But you'll just have to trust word of mouth with this one. This is definitely one of my favorite incidents I'm sharing today, because thousands of Undertale devotees managing to make the Steven Universe fandom look good, all because they failed to do the most simple fact check ever, is pure gold. Okay, Steven Universe fans, you've had your laugh, but don't think you're safe from ridicule just because Undertale groupies were dumbasses. There's so much low-hanging fruit I could pick from y'all, but there's one lesser-known example of your retardation which I find particularly hilarious. Back in 2017, the final season of Steven Universe was slated to air, and one Make-A-Wish kid asked to see some of the episodes early. Pretty lame wish if you ask me, but I'm not about to judge what a kid on their deathbed wants. No, that responsibility goes to a Steven Universe YouTuber named AllStruckVox. You see, this kid with terminal cancer committed the sin of sharing what they saw with others online, and afterwards, AllStruckVox made this passive-aggressive tweet towards them for supposedly leaking the episodes. After some justified backlash, he apologized for what he said. But the fact he even thought about saying anything at all brings up a bigger issue I have with pretty much all fandoms. Why the fuck do people care about spoilers so much? I get it. Surprises are nice. But I'm of the philosophy that a piece of media can, and should, stand on its own without them. If a show or movie loses all or most of its entertainment value because plot points have been loosely described to you, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it may not have been all that great to begin with. There's many more aspects besides simple shock factor which make a show, book, or film enjoyable. Anyway, whether you agree with my sentiment or not, I think everyone can agree that spoilers certainly aren't important enough that you should go after a kid with terminal cancer for sharing them. Even more so when the show they're spoiling is Steven Universe. So far, this has all been ultimately harmless stuff. Whether it be people being gross or just generally annoying, none of these fans have really crossed that line of being morally reprehensible. Until now. If you're watching YouTube, I'm sure you know who Markiplier and Jacksepticeye are. Given how widespread their presence is on this platform, it's not surprising to hear that some of their fans are a bit extra. And by extra, I mean that they would ship the two content creators together in strange fanfiction and artwork. That alone is a little weird. But at worst, it's morally gray, as long as things are kept PG.
Good grief, he's naked!
Yeah, needless to say, this is way overstepping your boundaries as a fan. It got so bad that even Jack and Mark have said some things against it. In the nicest way they could, of course. I, however, being a small voice who no one cares about, will not be as kind. If you draw two real-life people having sex with each other without their consent, you are a freak who should keep it to themselves. Enough said. Moving on. I'm gonna pivot to a topic I might lose some of you at. But if you hang in there, I promise it's just as interesting. You see, fandoms aren't just limited to the online world. They've been in existence since humans have had enough free time to develop hobbies. One of the most prominent fandoms that many might not think of as one is sports. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about college football. And no other place loves college football as much as the state of Alabama. In Alabama, there have been two main football programs throughout the sport's history, the University of Alabama and Auburn University. While the heated rivalry between the two schools has been kept close, the Crimson Tide have undoubtedly been the dominant force in the state. With this in mind, whenever Auburn knocks off Alabama, it's kind of a big deal. And when Auburn wins an important game, they have a little tradition where they throw toilet paper rolls on the oak trees at Toomer's Corner. This all leads into their 2010 rivalry game, where Auburn came back from a 24-point deficit to win the game, and an Alabama fan was so pissed about this that he decided to poison the trees at Toomer's Corner. Later, in an interview on the subject, he was quoted with his reasoning being, "I wanted Auburn people to hate me as much as I hate them." Alright, I know football doesn't interest 99% of you, but you gotta admit that this antic was just as wild as anything some of the more notorious fandoms have done. That story came from a place you probably didn't expect. So let's do a complete 180 and recall a tale from one you definitely are. Bronies. BronyCon is an event held by bronies for bronies. But what's a brony? I hear no one asking. A brony is a male fan of My Little Pony, typically an adult male fan. This clarification is needed because My Little Pony, if you couldn't tell, is a show targeted at little girls. And yes, it is 100% made for little girls. Just because anyone can enjoy the show doesn't change the fact it was, and still is, marketed primarily towards girls 10 and under. All of this leads to BronyCon 2019. Every convention needs security, and the organizers decided a great fit for the role would be Grizzly the Medic. They decided wrong. As it turns out, Mr. LaSalle likes him young, so much so that he was looking to hook up with a high school girl 4 years younger than him at the very event he was working security for. This was a grossly irresponsible situation from the BronyCon staff, and I, of course, feel bad for anyone Taylor LaSalle tried to victimize. With that being said, how ironic is it that underage girls can't feel safe at a convention about a show in which they're the main demographic? Also, how funny is it that this shitbird was so bold, he asked the girl he was grooming if she was 16 or 17. This dumb fuck is so much of a sicko that he dropped any excuse of ignorance. To top this fucked up situation off, a YouTuber named Leo Convoy went into the BronyCon Discord, and when he brought all of this up, he was put in timeout by moderators. This is a comically horrific mismanagement from a community that already had such a bad reputation. Luckily, as far as I know, no one was seriously harmed in this whole situation, but it isn't a good look to say the least. Speaking of bad reputation, let's talk about Sonic the Hedgehog. And who better to represent the Sonic fandom than good old CWC herself? Even though most of you probably know who Chris Chan is, and the story behind what I'm about to talk about, this still warrants a brief mention because I find it particularly silly. Back in 2014, a new game called Sonic Boom was preparing for release, and the first thing Sonic fans noticed about the game were some new designs for classic characters. For one Christine Weston Chandler, the most important aesthetic choice was Sonic's arm color. Those bastards at Sega had the gumption to change the color of Sonic's arms, and Chris was gonna do something about it. One fateful afternoon, months of outrage from the Sonic 2 creator, both in person and online, came to a crescendo. Chris was caught coloring Sonic's arms on a copy of Sonic Boom in GameStop. An employee noticed, and this iconic video was then caught by a bystander.
Don't call anybody.
If you couldn't tell, that GameStop employee faced the wrath of Christine's mace. I feel bad he had to go through that. especially because it was over something so bafflingly stupid. Am I the only one who constantly forgets which arm color came before and after Sonic Boom? I mean, seriously, this is a detail that anyone who isn't a Sonic fan could not be arsed to remember. And Chris thought it was so important that she resorted to physical violence over it. If you want a funnier retelling of the story, I recommend you read the Wikipedia article on it. I honestly only included this in the video because, if we're talking about fandoms, Chris Chan is an excellent litmus test for which ones to stay away from. Let's keep things rolling with another of the most infamous fandoms out there. One that already got a mention, but managed to one-up itself: Undertale. In this small indie game, there are these two characters named Sans and Frisk. Groundbreaking stuff, I know, but bear with me, this is important. Some people like to draw fan art of these two characters where they are romantically involved with each other. Some people don't like that, so they speak out against it. That'd be well enough, but one person apparently really doesn't like it. During a random convention in 2017, a Taiwanese fan artist who drew Sans X Frisk art received and ate a plate of cookies laced with needles, and it's been theorized that the aforementioned ship was the reason why. Once again, my condolences to the victim in this. No matter how you feel about the subject of their art, physical endangerment seems like a bit of an unhinged response to it. Just like with the blue arms, if you want a more fleshed out recap of the needle cookie incident, here's a video just for that. If you thought that was bad, our next event blows it out of the water. The perpetrating fandom is a little different in this case. You see, they weren't rabid over some video game or a movie or a show. No, this group was really passionate about a book, one named the Quran. Their passion was tested when a foreign government, which wasn't necessarily fond of their book, tried to invade their home nation of Afghanistan. With a little bit of help, they managed to fend off these haters, and their popularity and influence in the country was at its peak. After winning against one of the world's most powerful militaries, all for the sake of the Quran, this group of rebels known as Al-Qaeda were feeling a bit overzealous. They took this newfound confidence and evaluated what other world powers might not like their book as much as them. Soon enough, they found their target, and on the morning of September 11, 2001, Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 planes and flew 2 of them into the Twin Towers in New York City, killing 2,977 innocent United States citizens. And that was the craziest thing a fandom has ever done.